The year is 1998 in America. You boot up your Game Boy, and you hear that familiar sound. This is Pokemon, a turn-based role-playing game, or RPG for short. For those of you unaware of what a turn-based RPG is, it's exactly as the name implies, a game where the main wave battling is done through turns. You see, Pokemon was my first entry to the massive world of turn-based RPGs. However, I never finished it, and as I grew up, I found this type of gameplay to be tedious and boring. I passed on a multitude of games such as Paper Mario, Earthbound, Chrono Trigger, and even the entirety of the Final Fantasy franchise, instead opting for more live-action RPGs such as Kingdom Hearts, Zelda, and Xenoblade Chronicles. That was until a few years ago when I was given the job to create a video about the newly released Persona 5. You can still watch that video on the leaderboard or by clicking the eye in the top right corner. This game looked breathtaking. The visuals, the characters, the music, and even the combat was very enticing. I picked up my own copy, and over the course of a few months, sunk well over 115 hours into the game. Even after that much time, I still wanted more. Because of Persona 5, I was ready to dive into the world of turn-based RPGs. Then I hit a roadblock. A very unsightly blemish on my plan to get back into turn-based RPGs. A game that had a lot of hype built around it, and a game that had a company big enough tied to it that I trusted that it would be a good game. That game was Octopath Traveler. Hi, I'm Klubb with MURPHGAM, and welcome to my thoughts. Today we will be discussing the do's and don'ts of turn-based RPGs. Let's start by lining up our two contenders. Persona 5, developed by Atlus, is the fifth entry into the Persona series, which in and of itself is a spin-off of the Shin Megami Tensei series. However, Persona is so big now that you could almost consider it its own series, going as far as getting featured in Super Smash Bros. Not only that, but Persona 5 is getting a definitive edition in March called Persona 5 The Royal, something I'm personally very excited for. The gameplay of Persona 5 consists of two different types of gameplay: the turn-based RPG part, where you're dungeon crawling and kicking butt, and the social part of the game. Think The Sims. This part of the game is where you go around hanging out with friends and doing various activities as a normal student. However, we'll get into more detail about this later. For now, let's meet our second contender. Octopath Traveler is a standalone new RPG developed by Square Enix. This game follows the story of 8 different heroes that are on separate journeys that all meet together to make one big party. The biggest draw to this game was its unique style, choosing to go for a pixel art base in a 3D world. This game also has a very interesting twist on your everyday turn-based RPG, but yet again, we'll discuss that here in a bit. Now, as I stated in the intro, today we're going to be talking about the do's and don'ts of turn-based RPGs, using these two games as what I would call the very definition of the do's and don'ts. Can you figure out which one it is? Yeah, no. Persona 5 is definitely the do in this video. Now, that's not to say that Persona 5 is perfect and Octopath is an absolute nightmare, but I will say that both of these are very close to hitting that mark. Now, for the sake of keeping this video as simple and organized as possible, I'm going to break down certain aspects of each game. And don't worry, there won't be any major spoilers for either game. I'm only showing light visual spoilers for the first 2 dungeons for the game. Now then, let's get started with the story. Persona 5 follows the story of Rin, or Joker as his friends call him. You see, Joker was accused for a crime he never committed, causing him to be sent away to stay with a friend of his parents for a year while he's on probation. Over the course of the next couple of days, he learns that he has the power to control what are called persona. Fitting name, huh? Joker discovers a world where people from his world have shadow versions of themselves that display their distorted desires. He learns that by taking these shadows' treasure, their real version selves will have a change of heart. And so, with With his newfound powers and his new friends, they form a group called the Phantom Thieves to track down some more distorted people and force them to have a change of heart so that they can change society and rid the world of rotten adults. If it felt like I spoiled the game, I assure you I didn't. This is as basic as a premise as it gets, and keep in mind, this game is over 100 hours long. It's not often I see games made by adults talk about such a concept as changing society because the adults messed it up. As the story evolves and you meet these so-called rotten adults, it only encourages you to bring down the hammer of justice as quickly as you can. You want to see these evil people behind bars, and you'll stop at nothing to do so. As you progress through the game, you meet new people and have more and more interactions that only heighten the experience, creating this full story that you've shared with the friends you've made the past 100 hours. Now, this isn't to say the story is perfect. There's one particular moment late game that feels shoehorned in, only to just cause tension among your friends, only for it to be resolved almost immediately. If you've played Persona 5, you know what I'm talking about, and honestly I believe this part to be the most awkward and could have been taken out. Besides this one oversight, the story of Persona 5 is a beautiful masterpiece. Alright, now it's Octopath's turn. Where do I start? You see, this is the first problem with this game. Like I said, there are 8 different characters in this game. You may be asking, who's the main character? Well, all of them? The game starts with asking you who you want to be your main character. That character will stay in your party permanently through the rest of the game. Honestly, this is a great idea. Well, at least it would have been if it mattered. You see, each character has their own story, their own beginning, middle, and end. You would think that choosing a character would cause the story of everyone else's story to change. But no, it doesn't. What Octopath does instead is have none of the characters interject into anyone else's story. Say for instance, I'm playing out a mission for the first new character I meet. My quote-unquote main character will never say a word. They're just there to fight and watch, and that's it. But the same would go if it was flipped. No matter who's in your party, the attention will always be on whoever's quest you're doing at the time, and that's it. Now, there is one exception. There are moments after cutscenes where your party members will have something to say about it, but instead of it being a cutscene, it's just them standing in an empty space, talking, and it feels lazy. In fact, the way this entire story is structured feels lazy. Each character has their own story, and because there's very little interaction between your party, it makes all stories feel disjointed and not fun. What's worse is that at the end of the game, they attempted to join all the stories into one, but it didn't work. I would go as far as saying that it failed miserably. Now granted, some of the individual stories were interesting, but they were kind of weighed down by their horrific gameplay. Let's just get Octopath over this time. The central mechanic in Octopath's turn-based combat is the break and boost system. So basically, certain enemies have a weakness to either a specific type of magic or specific type of weapon, or both. Once you've figured it out, you need to attack them with that specific type of weakness as many times as this shield counter indicates. Now on top of this, your party members have a boost mechanic, meaning if you wait a turn, you'll get one of these dots at the top of your character. When you want, you can apply up to 4 dots to your character to boost their attack. This can either increase the damage or increase the amount of times you hit the enemy, and that's essentially it. Now when it comes to selecting your party members, you want to make sure you have a wide range of different attacks you can do so that you can counter every enemy you come across. You even get the opportunity later in the game to combine the abilities of certain characters with other characters so that they can have new abilities and new weapons. Pretty straightforward with an interesting new way of doing turn-based gameplay. But outside of combat, there is another new mechanic this game presents. You see, each character has different abilities that they can use on NPCs, such as gathering information or buying things off of them. This actually makes for a really engaging way to have the players explore towns more often. On top of this, there are characters in your party that have similar abilities, but have negative outcomes if you fail. For example, one character can buy things and another character can steal things. However, if that character fails to steal the item and gets caught, they become more distrusted in the town. Here's our first problem though. You can literally just save right before you attempt, and if you fail, just reset. I guess technically that's cheating, but it's so simple to do and it doesn't take long to get back into the game that I was totally fine with abusing the system. Now, the system and mechanics I mentioned for Octopath are actually pretty great. It's the structure that causes it to fall apart. It's sad to say, but literally every mission is exactly the same. Every single one. Well, that is except for one, but I'll refrain from talking about it since, spoilers. Anyways, let me lay this out for you. You start with your character, you watch a cutscene, they have you do something that involves your ability, another cutscene, short dungeon, boss. On top of this, there are 8 characters, with 4 main story quests, meaning you do this same process 32 times, minus the one I mentioned earlier. It becomes very predictable and unfun. Not to mention that there are only about 4 different designs for the ways the dungeons look, so it becomes very stale very quickly. This ununiqueness paired with a disjointed, unfun story makes for a very slow and boring experience. I haven't even talked about the worst offense of all, random encounter battles. For those of you who don't know what this is, it's exactly as it states. You can't see any enemies, you're just walking around, and boom, you're in a battle. You have no control over this other than abilities that make this happen less often, but if you were to do that, you would be severely underpowered. Now, random encounters have been around for a while, and people enjoy them, and I completely understand, but for me personally, I despise this form of fighting. I would like to see the enemy and have full control over whether I should fight, sneak around, or flee. Being low on health and being randomly thrown into a battle I couldn't avoid is the last thing I want to do. Finally, the last thing about Octopath I want to talk about is the leveling system. Octopath suffers from another RPG trait I don't enjoy, not actively leveling up party members who aren't in your party. Say I have 4 party members in my party, but they don't have one particular weapon that I absolutely need to take on a boss. I can't switch in anybody else because they will be severely underpowered, because they haven't been in my party this entire time, thus causing me to go out of my way to grind every character up to where the main character is, just so that I can use them properly. I find this to be tedious and annoying and super unfun. The last thing I want to do is grind for hours on end just to fight one boss. Just to give you guys a heads up, if you do decide to play this, that thing I mentioned earlier about them trying to join all the characters' stories together at the end, yeah, that requires you to use every character, so you better get to grinding. Alright, now let's talk about Persona 5. Just to get the obvious out of the way, there are no random encounters, your party members level up even if they aren't in your party, and the dungeon design and story structure is unique and different every time you start a new dungeon. Immediately, Persona 5 is already looking appealing, but let's talk about the battle mechanics and other gameplay mechanics. Surprisingly, Persona's battle mechanics are very similar to Octopath's in the way you have to find enemy weaknesses. You find out the enemy's elemental weakness, and once you damage them with their weakness, you get another attack. Also keep in mind this also works vice versa, where the enemy will get another turn if they hit your weakness. To add to this, Joker is a special Persona user. He has the ability to call on multiple personas in battle, giving him a wide variety of attacks to choose from. Once you've knocked all the foes down, you have 3 options. You can negotiate with the enemy to give you money or an item, you can talk to them and try to convince them to join your side, effectively turning them into a persona, or you can do an all-out attack, a flashy finishing move that does massive damage. Speaking of the all-out attack, have you noticed the user interface of this game as I've been showing off the footage? This game has the most stylish interface I have ever seen in a video game. On a first glance, you might find this comic book looking aesthetic to be distracting on the eyes, but honestly, it's one of the most glorious and smooth interfaces I've ever had the privilege of using in a game. I hope more games in the future take note and start to do more stylized interfaces, because this is just pure eye candy. Moving on, with the multiple personas you have, you can then take them to the Velvet Room, a staple in the Persona series, and have your personas fused together to create even more powerful personas. As I was playing through the game, I got more and more addicted to creating the perfect persona, trying to mix and match different personas' abilities to create a healing persona, or an ice persona, or so on and so forth. As you progress, you'll get more and more options on what you can do with your persona in the Velvet Room, but I'll keep that a mystery for you to find out on your own. The last gameplay mechanic I want to talk about is probably my favorite part of the entire game: social stats and confidants. Let's start with the social stats. These are knowledge, proficiency, charm, guts, and kindness. The way you level up all these different stats are by doing various activities such as reading a book, taking a Big Bang Burger challenge, playing a video game, watching a movie, and so on and so on. Increasing these stats help you unlock different confidants. Confidants are the bonds you form with the people out in the real world that help give you abilities when fighting. Spending time with them will do things like increase the amount of experience you get when fusing personas, give you new abilities like being able to get more money when you're negotiating with an enemy, or you might even be able to start an intimate relationship with someone. Each of these confidants are like their own little mini story. With them, you make so many new friends and learn so much about people that surround you in your daily life. But here's the cool part about this. Spending time with these people is actively helping you get stronger when you go dungeon crawling. It's such a simple mechanic, but yet adds this nice yin and yang to the game where you feel like everywhere you go, you're having a meaningful experience. Something Octopath was missing drastically. For the last section, I want to talk about something I feel that both games handled masterfully. Yes, even Octopath. Music is an important factor to any game. It sets the emotions you should be feeling during a certain time, and it paints a picture. Sometimes that picture can be horrendous. Take the music from Crazy Bus, for instance. Okay, enough of that. What would the music sound like if it was a beautifully painted picture with that feeling of calmness? It would probably sound something like Persona 5's Beneath the Mask. Ah, that's it. Persona 5's music theme of choice varies between this calm, relaxing music to more of an upbeat, jazzy feel, like the song Last Surprise. Would you believe that this song plays every single time you go into combat? You would think this would get annoying, but it's the exact opposite. You get pumped up, ready for battle, and once you've heard this song enough, you'll start singing along with it every time you go into battle. But what about Octopath? Well, I'm happy to report that the music in this game is the most redeeming quality of the entire game. Every single song, from the villages to the different music for enemy encounters, all the way down to the cutscenes, is perfect in every way. But the crown jewel, the thing that tops it all, is the boss battle music. If you weren't already aware, Octopath has a very sneaky way of making songs before boss fights transition in a way that makes it seamless. They do this so that when you're watching the cutscene, whenever you press the button to dismiss the last text box, the game will flawlessly transition its music into boss battle music. Take a listen.
It's time you learned that money is might!
Now, let's get down to business.
Just for the sake of how cool this is, let me give you one more example with a different song.
Now I'll have to settle for sucking your blood!
I cannot fail!
Isn't that remarkable? Never in my life have I ever played a game with so much attention to detail when it comes to the structure of an orchestral piece. I was blown away when I heard this for the first time, and it still blows me away to this very day. Now, let's quickly go over the do's and don'ts. Do. Have an interesting and compelling story that drives you forward. Don't have a disjointed and lazy story that causes you to not have fun. Do. Have new and fun ideas to make the game fun and engaging. Don't ruin those ideas by making an experience that feels repetitive and boring. Do use a system that doesn't require needless grinding. Don't waste the player's time. And lastly, do create beautiful pieces of music to heighten your experience. After I beat Persona 5, I went on to try some more turn-based RPGs. That's what eventually brought me to Octopath Traveler. But even though Octopath left a bad taste in my mouth, it didn't stop me from trying more turn-based RPGs, like Paper Mario and Persona 4. I even came full circle and played through Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Pokemon Sword. And you know what? I loved every single minute of it. Because of Persona 5, I have a new perspective on what should make a turn-based RPG fun, and now I can fully enjoy everything these games have to offer, even though they're not all for me. These games have opened up a new door of possibilities for me, and I can't wait to try them all. But those are just my thoughts.